This is a kind of like an impromptu, um, kind of like earlier in the day stream. Don't usually do stuff like this. Uh, but I I like reacting to like debates and stuff, and I saw the Serfs put this out. Sorry, I had feedback there for a second, I think. But yeah, I got my cereal here, having a good. Well, it's technically more of a lunch, but like a breakfast kind of thing. And I'll probably put in my 2 cents here and there. I'm of the mind that like transracialism is like kind of like cultural appropriation on steroids. But let's like to hear what both sides have to say.
One thing.
And I'm also a pretty big fan of Lance from the Serfs, so full disclosure there too. But let's get started.
The idea of gender dysphoria and how to treat it was not like something that just happened overnight. This took decades of research and then more research to prove that like actually transitioning was a valid thing to do. So helping them wasn't just like a knee-jerk response of like these people's lives would be better if we help them. It was legitimately seeing like, okay, these people have high suicide rates. Is that linked to their gender dysphoria? Yes, it is. Can we solve these high suicide rates in their gender dysphoria by helping them transition? Yes, we can. Um, this, the way that this is being framed is almost like, to me, a sense of entitlement. Like, sure, if transracial people want to have a rights
Oh,
movement to show that they are valid
it's a
and that what they're
long
going through
intro.
is that they're going through, so that way they can get a diagnosis, sure. But even if they get the diagnosis, I don't think that necessarily having the treatments being done.
Okay.
While we wait for Ninetails to figure out her internet connection, do you want to do a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to it. I pretty much just shit post on Twitter, and once in a while, people get mad at what I say, and then I'm always happy to talk about it.
Seems honest and concise. Where can people find you and your shit posting?
Know Nothing TV on Twitter, Twitch,
Make sure my
etc.
audio is
It's that's the name for
decent.
everything.
Very good. And I guess the other thing would be I've seen on your Twitter profile you consider yourself to be the final boss of Twitter. Was that a self-described moniker, or was that someone who gave it to you?
Someone gave that to me.
What's the story behind that?
Oh no, I just thought it was a funny quote. I mean, I just made some tweet or whatever, got into an argument, and then somebody commented, "Wow, this dude's the final boss of Twitter" or whatever, and then I added it to my bio.
That is actually pretty funny. Ninetails, while I'm just resizing your window, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself? Oh, I'm also not getting video. I'm just getting your look. Oh, there we go. Nice. We got it all. All right. Ninetails, you want to do a quick intro to yourself, where people can find you, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Ninetails. You can just a general lefty debater. I try to be intellectual about things, so I often try to prep and read and stuff like that. Not so much of a drama debater. You can find me at twitch.tv/Ninetails Cosmicfox. Also on Twitter. Oh, and by the way, Ninetails Cosmicfox is all words. But on Twitter, it's a different story. It's at M9Scarlet, and that's actually the letter M, the number 9, and Scarlet with 2 T's. A little bit confusing, but definitely worth following my Twitter so you can catch me on a Twitch stream because I only stream the best stuff.
And do y'all want to give just a quick introduction to what you'll be debating today and what you'll be taking in terms of the affirmative and the negative in terms of this position?
Right, right, good idea. We are debating whether or not society should accept transracial people, and I will be taking the negative side. I see that KnowNothing's looking like, was that the discussion topic we chose? And it will have to be more about society than people in general. But yeah, I'm taking the negatory because I don't think race can be handled that way.
All right. So you all agreed on 3-minute introductions to your arguments. Since you're taking the negative in this position, I believe traditionally you would be the first to go, Ninetails. So do you want to start us? And I will start 3 minutes on the clock right now.
Well, yeah, thank you, Lance, for moderating, and thank you to Know Nothing for having this debate with me. My opponent has asked for a rather open-ended topic, so I am going to make an open-ended intro. Um, We're here today because of a simple tweet by our good friend Lance. It's simple in syntax, but not in meaning. Lance had the gall to say that transracialism is like cultural appropriation on nightmare mode. Now, luckily, Lance doesn't have to defend those statements because this isn't the topic, but what I do find
That's
interesting is KnowNothing.
that is similar to what I said, but in my defense, I did skim a little bit. I did not mean to steal what Lance said.
Response that it's either transphobic or racist. I was
Human beings are just wired that way.
swept away. I had never seen someone firsthand try to conflate the fact of gender with the idea of race. For those who don't realize, these things do not compare cleanly to each other, both as psychological identities or social constructs. On the other hand, is the suspicion of racism. But I'd argue that the people appropriating a culture, confusing it with race, and then trying to change their physical characteristics to that race are the truly potential racists, not in a self-aware way, but rather in that they're effectively essentializing what that race is. Given that these cultural differences are not inherent to the biological facts about race, and the idea of biological realities of race are tenuous at best, there is no basis for society to do other than ignore these people. To do anything other than ignore these people. We're not talking about white people who dress like they're black. We're talking about people who want to be recognized as something that has never been treated this way. My position is that it's ahistorical, counterfactual, and selfish to expect communities to accept a person as their own simply because they feel like that race. Most importantly, race is becoming obsolete for all but those who are studying relevant fields where these distinctions actually kind of matter. So if we consider race to be what society accepts, then we can make a good case for racial groups to not accept essentialized caricatures into it, especially from a social justice and legal framework. From the perspective of what we do allow, there are simply no other cases that we can use without complicating things further. And finally, while while race will certainly have significance in history and the culture of these groups, the actual impact of one's race loses its merits the more the roles become obsolete. If we try to compare this to gender, we see it hardly scales at all. Gender roles will always exist even if the expectations wane away, but ultimately it should be obvious that society really can't do much for transracial people anyhow, and recognizing them officially and giving them the same rights as colored people only jeopardizes what colored communities have fought so hard to obtain.
Yeah, like what happens if like somebody who's claiming to be transracial, um, like all of a sudden starts trying to like accept benefits for that are only available for that certain race because they were harmed in the past. It doesn't make any sense. But there would probably be some, you know, transracial Karens that might do that.
That's not to say transracial people don't experience components of that race, but it's a severe logical leap to bring it to meaning someone is now a part of that race. And that's my introduction.
Or men, or chuds. Didn't mean to only target women there.
That sounds good. Yeah. So yeah, as Ninetails mentioned, this started with the Lance tweet.
Yeah, sorry.
I
Just one quick introduction. I don't worry. I'll start the clock as soon as you start talking. Do you want 10 seconds warnings before before your times are up? Well, I guess there won't be any more times from this. Okay, I apologize. Anyways, KnowNothing. Take it away. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, from my perspective, race is a social construct that has historically just been used to marginalize, otherize, stereotype other people based on this so-called race that we're putting them in the box of. And we long term we want to abolish race as a concept that's significant for identifying people. But as it stands, we're still in a society where many societies treat race as a very important component of their culture. Um, and what's factual is like there are plenty of examples of people who just feel like they very much identify with the culture, and to better fit in, they just present themselves as a different race than they would be normally put in the box of. And I don't really get what harm necessarily is going to be coming from just saying that, yeah, in general, we should accept people as what they want to present as, considering race isn't like an essentialized thing. It is a social construct that we want to abolish anyways. If it's going to make someone's life easier to present as a different race than they are, and they're able to pass as that race, and of course that's to be genuine, then I don't see why we shouldn't want to accept them.
Okay. So I'm just gonna basically leave it open floor for about an hour. Y'all can go back and forth. I mean, you both seem incredibly good faith and friendly, so I don't think you'll need much in terms of me. But if you start just yelling past each other to the point that people can't hear, just please maybe just take a second to listen to me. If I'm like, hey, let's just reset, and I'll just make sure everyone has a chance to speak and get their ideas out there. And also, please let me know if you feel like you haven't had the opportunity to get something out on the record that perhaps you're like, I really wish you would have let me, exemplify this point. Then yes, I'll let you say that as well. Okay. And yeah, just take it away, both of you.
So yeah, your explanation didn't really explain to me why people actually need to look like that race to be accepted as a part of it. Like, we actually do accept people who kind of act like a different race, and then we just don't make demands of them to look like that race. They might get fun of by certain people, but like, they do have the ability to take part in that culture. Why do they have to take it to an extreme logical leap where they're taking part in characteristics that you don't even
Lance
agree
disappeared.
should be components of race?
Well, I think the problem is that many societies do take race very seriously, where to truly like fit in with a certain group, if you don't pass as looking at like them, you're always going to be seen and treated as an outsider, and nobody wants to be treated as an outsider in what they feel like is their own like community. Like, the most recent example in the news was Ollie London, who he really fell in love with South Korean culture, and if he wants to live in
Oh, the ironic thing about with Ollie London is that like the person that he's trying to look like has had a lot of plastic surgery to like look more Anglo. So it's like the it's kind of like the Spider-Man meme there.
South Korea and be treated like a South Korean there, where it's like one of the most homogeneous countries, it would be much more difficult to him if he couldn't pass. So he did decide to do several surgeries, and now he can pass as a South Korean. If he goes to South Korea, most people will just be able to treat him as an ordinary South Korean, and I don't really see the problem with that. Like, why should we
So
be mad at him that he's just trying to fit in with the culture he wants to be a part of?
So passing, according to you, in South Korea is fundamentally important to be accepted as part of that culture. There's no possibility for a melting pot culture there.
I'm no expert, but that is what his explanation was. And maybe he's wrong, but it is just more of an example. We could just say, as a hypothetical, there was such a society where it was hard to fit in if you didn't pass as a certain race. Then what would the problem be with someone deciding to try to pass?
Well, for one thing, the biggest problem would be expecting like a hive mind from that race to just accept them. That's not going to happen, for one thing. Secondly, this like race has never been used as an inclusive group, as you've said. So making it an inclusive group, I don't think is as important as making it obsolete. And that being said, like, I don't think groups of racists are better off like getting mad at these people for trying to take on their culture. It's still cultural appropriation, no matter how you want to put it. But um, like, so I don't think that these groups are necessarily justified in saying you need to look like me to be a part of that culture. What I'm saying is that there's no realistic way that you can expect like Koreans to accept Ollie London, even now that they've gotten this surgery. A lot of them are just going to say, well, you just got surgery to look like us, but you're still white. And I think like when we do look at how society
is still
treats
white.
race in general, they're going to say that. They're going to say you're still white.
It's like a colonizer thing.
They know about his history, they might. But let's say he wasn't such a highly publicized person and nobody knew about it. Then what would be like the moral problem with him just moving to South Korea and acting like as if he's always been South Korean?
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like, ideally he can do that without having to get this surgery too. He might face some discrimination for it, but that's that's kind of a fact of life, and I don't think actually the way to solve that is by changing your race. I think that opens you up to more discrimination, which any trans person can confirm. So I don't think. Oh, and someone in my chat says that they think Ollie uses they them pronouns. By the way, and
Okay.
so I lost my train of thought. Do you want to respond to whatever you were going to say next?
Yeah, it feels like you're like
Our AC
saying like
just,
two
like,
things at
kicked
once. Like with the would prefer that they did that any culture didn't have racist tendencies where if you aren't the race that their culture tends to be, you get otherized. I agree. I want to abolish race. But the fact of the matter is race has not been abolished. So as it's not while it's not abolished, I don't see why we shouldn't be wanting to be accepting of people who try being more malleable with the way they present. And
It's because racism exists. If, like, racism didn't exist, then maybe we could have some sort of conversation. But, like, races have been harmed by, like, white people. And to say that it's okay for, like, a white person to claim that race as their own, that's just really kind of messed up.
Well,
you get what
well,
I'm saying
just to,
there?
yeah, just to be extra clear, I don't think these people should be targeted or harassed or anything like that. So as far as accepting them goes, they definitely don't deserve any hate or anything like that. But the reason, like, communities have plenty of reasons to not accept someone who isn't a part of their race into the community. One of the things is that, like, we look at reparations and stuff like that. We don't want to suddenly make that a non-excludable thing. We need that to be excludable for the meaning and value of those reparations to matter. Otherwise, it's just a club that gets money for being a part of the club. Um, so from a social justice perspective, it's actually super important that we kind of delineate these things in ways that are succinct instead of muddying the waters and then being like, well, now who gets reparations? It's hard to tell because anyone can be black.
And it's like what I was saying earlier, like like a a white person that becomes black should not get, like, reparations because of slavery.
Yeah, okay, I see that point with reparations, and I don't think I'd like want to be like make a strong argument that someone who transitions to presenting as black, like a Rachel Dolezal, should be given reparations. I wouldn't. I don't think I'd make that strong of a claim. I would more just say that we should be fine with her as a person, and I don't think she did anything necessarily wrong by presenting as black and trying to be what she felt like she was.
First of all, she lied about who her family actually was. So the lying part was definitely wrong, even if, like, what she was lying about isn't wrong. Um, and I agree that, like, we shouldn't think less of these people for being this way. I'm not going to say that they're not having like what they perceive to be the experience of another race and that they genuinely believe this. But I will say that, like, as far as society, like, acknowledging that, yes, you're this other race, I think that's ridiculous. Race has never been treated that way. Um, because and that's the problem is that, like, when it comes to the fact that these are already arbitrary boxes that we forcefully put people into for the sake of hegemony, um, it doesn't make sense to, like, further this more by complicating what it means. We should be, like, moving away from how would I put it, substantiating these roles in society.
Yeah, as I said, I'll say again, I agree we should mostly be moving away from substantiating these roles. But what I'm saying is, I don't think there's many transracial people, and I don't think there ever will be because I don't think race dysphoria is a biological thing that really ever exists as far as we know, while gender dysphoria does. All I'm saying is that insofar as they do exist and people want to get like into the in group of a culture
At
that
least
is
he is not
of a certain
transphobic.
race, I don't see the problem with that as long as race is a concept that we haven't abolished yet.
So, sorry, yeah, my chat distracted me. Um, the thing is that, like, there's really no middle ground here. We're either going to preserve race and make these things like codified aspects of social reality, or we're going to abolish it. I think what you're doing is taking, like, a middle ground stance. sort of that keeps race where it is, where that's not actually the way to solve like race relations at all. uh, to me, like solving these like so like how would I explain this? Like if we can't even justify the foundations of race, then them calling themselves that race is even further unjustified.
Yeah, as I said, I agree with all that. Like, I feel like we're talking in circles at this point. Like, I think you're overemphasizing maybe the significance of what transracial people would do to be against the cause of racial abolition, because, as I said, they're so few and far in between that they really won't have any society-wide effect accepting them. Like, I don't really think there's a good argument that having a few people who want to fit in with a specific
Well,
culture that has a certain race is hurting the cause at all.
Well, first of all, accepting someone doesn't just happen for like on an individual scale. Um, it happens to an individual, but it's a social scale thing. So saying like, oh, it's just really easy, just accept them, it's not because there. First of all, there's going to be variation within communities. So let's say it's a black community, opinions, a black community's opinion of Rachel Dolezal. Then you're going to have even mixed opinions within that, and if you're going to create like what would I say, like social not doctrine, uh, social expectations that say you have to accept these people as the race they are, otherwise you're a racist. We need like a solid foundation of race and an even more solid foundation for why they feel like that race. And there's nothing in the literature that even like comes close to identifying this.
That's a really good point. Like, it would be ridiculous for to call somebody a racist to who is against like transracialism. It'd be ridiculous.
I'm trying to find a way where we can hit the same point because I feel like we're almost having different discussions in one level. Like,
Well,
I'm
okay,
not
so
saying. Okay, go.
I just want to point out, like, I think the fact that like race hasn't been abolished yet is more reason to not accept them because then we're only like codifying race and moving away from that goal is what I mean. I don't think transracial people themselves are responsible for that. But I don't see the utility in doing that if we're already trying to do the literal opposite.
Utility is it makes these people's lives better and happier and more fulfilling. But also,
Sure.
just a quick question: do you believe in gender abolition?
Yes.
Okay, so like, would you say that the transgender community, in a sense, might the same way where you're saying that having transracial people hurts the racial abolition movement? Is there any way where transgender people might hurt the gender abolition movement? But in both cases, we would want to accept those people because it's obviously making their lives a lot better and happier,
Maybe I spoke too
and
soon.
it's not like a serious hinderment to the cause.
So for one thing, the idea of gender dysphoria and how to treat it was not like something that just happened overnight. This took, decades of research and then more research to prove that like actually transitioning was a valid thing to do. So helping them wasn't just like a knee-jerk response of like these people's lives would be better if we help them. It
I
was
was laughing
legitimately
at something I
seeing
said in chat.
like, okay, these people have high suicide rates. Is that linked to their gender dysphoria? Yes, it is. Can we solve these high suicide rates in their gender dysphoria by helping them transition? Yes, we can. This, the way that this is being framed is almost like, to me, a sense of entitlement. Like, sure, if transracial people want to have a rights movement to show that they are valid and that what they're going through is that they're going through, so that way they can get a diagnosis, sure. But even if they get the diagnosis, I don't think that necessarily having the treatments being done will lead to them feeling better because I don't think society is going to be even any more accepting of them in their race. In fact, I think they're going to have a lot more struggles with people revealing their former identity, using that against them, and harassing them about not being that race. And I'm against that, but I when you say like their life becomes easier, you can't just say like, okay, they're the race they identify now as now they're happier. Like that, it took a lot of medical research and studies and debate for even people to believe that trans people could be happier once they transition. And I think you need to substantiate that in the same way for race if you're going to have the same sense of entitlement to, oh, well, I'll just be happier if I get to live the race I live. The same thing applies to me. I feel I'd be happier if I could live as a fox. I don't think that means society has to, like, um, uh, facilitate that in any way.
Okay, yeah. I guess now I think I see like a clear area of difference where
Nice.
like even before
Got like furry representation.
like we had all the research we have showing how like valid and much it helps people to transition. I still would have, my intuition would have been that yeah, if people say that they're suffering with gender dysphoria or whatever, or they say that they really want to be seen as a sex or gender different than what they were born as, my intuition would have been that yeah, we should probably try to be accepting of those people.
Well, that's you. Oh, okay. And like,
I'm saying that's what I'm saying. That might just be a fundamental difference between us.
yeah, and I'm gonna say like right now, if that's how gender reassignment surgery came to be, then there'd be a lot of medical inconsensus on the issue, and there could be any chance that your doctor just doesn't want to do your surgery because they don't think you're trans. Now, it's the fact that there's all of this little medical literature substantiating how like that trans people need that for therapy that basically puts them against their Hippocratic oath to not give them that treatment. And that's why I do think like race groups need the same. Now, just as a thought experiment, let's say, what would you tell a black person who doesn't accept the idea that someone who's transracially black is actually black? How would you convince them that they should accept them as black? Because remember, this is a social scale thing, so we're going to need some sort of homogeneity.
Good luck. Good luck.
In the way we treat this as a society. So how are you going to convince people of these communities that they should accept this person as that race?
Good question. Yeah. Mm, yeah, I guess that is a very difficult discussion to have, which is why my preference was always just to present as you've always been a black white person, or you've always been a black person, and you pass as such. And there's no question about like, oh, you used to be something else. You're just seen as this is what I've always been. This is my racial or cultural identity. But in the case where people are uncomfortable with the idea of saying like, oh no, this isn't a real black person, let's say, I don't think I honestly would have much to say to them. Like, I don't think I'd even want to argue with them because that like feels
Yeah.
like a conversation that isn't in my place to have.
And
Oh,
a
it's
lot of
that's
transracial people
decent.
say like,
Like, yeah, you shouldn't even attempt to argue that.
I feel this way because I pass as this way and everyone treats me that way. So we don't really need like what they're trying to do is accelerate that, or I should say escalate that, so that way there is no doubt in people. So like Rachel Dolezal, for example. So if they're having this experience and it's because they pass, they don't really need more procedures to make them pass more. I think I honestly think that like given the low frequency, the fact that there doesn't seem to be an epidemic of transracial people committing suicide, that therapy might be a considerable option for these people if they're trying to feel less distress about this. And again, if I saw like, and I mean like considerable amount of literature showing not only does their dysphoria cause them some sort of like actual ailments, because we all live under distress, and I don't think medically speaking or socially speaking we do much about people feeling stress necessarily. We try to deal with things that are categorizable and have like reliable effects. So like with drug addiction and stuff like that. So I think it's important that we do substantiate why we need to help these people and not just say like, oh, well, we do it for trans people, so let's do it for transracial people. That would be ideal if everything was that simple, but societies don't work that way. Trans people did not just get access to surgery just because we said we feel like the way we are. So instead of doing all that, I'd rather see us get rid of of any lingering significance and prejudice against race in society. Feel like we have a much better chance of doing that than trying to facilitate a handful of people who honestly kind of describe an experience that doesn't need treatment anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with you, honestly. Like, yeah, obviously the more important goal is abolishing it as a concept. And if you're going to do surgeries that could be like health threatening or difficult and stuff like that, then I would want to see more literature before we allowed such surgeries. But most transracial people, as far as I know, and the most examples I've seen, they don't really do surgery. They're just like, let's say they're like, I know I have a friend who's both of his parents are white, but he passes as black kind of pretty well, just like a genetic whatever, because as we know, like race is a social construct in the first place, where he has like three siblings who look very white and he just happens to look dark. And he he presents as white and everything, like if someone asks him, he's white, but he could easily like decide if he felt so that he wanted to be presenting as black, and I think most black people would accept him. And I
No,
think like
no, I think they would accept them up until they found out about their family history, and then
no, I
you'd have
agree with that. I agree with that. They
What
wouldn't.
is he doing?
I don't think most black people would accept him once they found out that both his parents were white or whatever. I'm saying that like he'd be able to be seen as black if they didn't know that. And a case where such a person would actually like feel the need to want to be accepted in the black communities. Let's say he was adopted by a black family, all his siblings
Oh,
were
okay.
black, and he and his community was black, where he's just been around black people his whole life, and he sees that as part of who he is. And he had two white parents, let's say, but he just happens to be black passing.
Mhm.
I don't think it's the worst thing for him to say that, you know what, I'm going to continue to present as black because that's the community I grew up in. That's my parents are black, my siblings are black, and who cares that my um, biological parents weren't? Nobody knows that, anyways.
Well, yeah, but that's the problem is that, like, based on, first of all, based on how we have used race, just having black parents, stuff like that, has never been sufficient criteria. Second of all, you could say that they had maybe the ethnic experience of being black, but not the, like, physical experience of being black. And of course, like, to say how different these experiences are is incredibly subjective. But, like, I have a question for you is, like, how many ways can you think of that society would have to change to accept transracial people? And like the way I go about this is I think about how many ways society even deals with race to begin with, and there actually aren't that much. Like, often we're talking about systemic factors that play themselves out, like either economically or ethically or stuff like that. But like in your day-to-day interactions with people, aside from conversation, we're going to leave out conversation. How often does your race actually come up?
Almost never for me.
And like I'm white, so maybe it's far more common for black
Mhm.
people, and I don't want to leave out that possibility. But it seems to me like society doesn't actually deal in race as often as like people do. Like when we interact with somebody, our interactions with them might have to do with race, even if it's subconscious. But I don't think that there's a lot of social norms that actually embody race,
She's not moving around the titles, the names.
or that should.
I don't know. As
But I do kind of want to give Lance props on his like stone face. He's been pretty uh unemotional the entire debate.
a white person, I'm not sure if I could like accept that. I think, at least from all of what I've heard, like for black people, less now than let's say in the 1960s or 1950s, 1940s, etc. But it historically just has been a huge part of their life because they're treated as less than because of it. They're at fear of the cops because of it, etc., etc. I feel like it actually is a big part of it for certain people.
Okay, but like again, I'm talking about like actual social norms. So, um, I guess this is too vague of a thing for me to really ask, so I'll just drop it after this. But the point is that like even if like we did do all this like accepting and stuff like that, the actual mass impact that it would have on this person's life is minimal. They might not even notice that society has accepted them versus not accepting them, and they're still going to face I guess we can call it bigotry. They're still going to face prejudice on both accounts: prejudice from the people who they want to accept them as not being good enough, and prejudice from the people who still see them as being their original race. So I don't see how this could possibly be a solution when like a lot of these problems that you're talking about only exacerbate when you out yourself as your identity. And I I don't know. I think if they're like their whole thing is not that they feel personally they should be a different race, but that they're being treated differently and that's causing them distress, then they're just going to be treated even more differently and have more distress if society if we try to like get society to be something it's essentially not.
Yeah, fair enough.
And like that was a hard decision even for me as a trans woman, right? Is like I am going to get harassed more. I'm going to face misogyny I never had to deal with, but now but like am I going to be happier? I didn't know. I just kind of like dove in under the assumption that what everyone was telling me was right and it was right. Um so when I hear that these people just want to do this, I wonder like where is the doubt? Where is like where is their concern with how they're going to be treated afterwards? I think I think it's a cosmetic sense of entitlement, to be honest, and that's about it.
Do you elaborate that a sense of entitlement? Like,
Um, well, like say like in the sense of like Ollie Williams, he's got a lot of money and can afford all the like all the surgeries and stuff to do what he wanted to do. Uh, it's like all basically cosmetic stuff, and like if he's got the money and wants to do that, that's on him. It's a free country. I don't think he should. I think it's like pretty messed up, but I think we have bigger problems to worry about, to be honest.
Oh yeah, they
like
see trans.
I feel like you a part of that is like we've been talking a lot about white people trying to pass as like black or Asian or whatever, but
Oh,
like
I
let's
wasn't
say it's
trying to be specific.
I'm saying like what do you call like someone who's, let's say, father was black, mother was white, let's say, got adopted as a baby by a white family, and biracial in such a sense that like it could have gone either way. Like whatever he decided to present as, that's what society would think of him as. Like, is it a sense of
Sure.
entitlement that he decides to present as black despite? I mean,
That's like
decides
one
to present as
person
white
though.
despite being like half black. Like I wouldn't call.
He's like holding it up. He's holding this up based on like this one uh anecdotal like instance where it was like somebody who appears black born from white parents or whatever. And like that's not what the I mean so there might be others like that, but that's not like what the majority of them would be, even though it would be a relatively small amount of people to begin with.
Well,
Entitlement.
it's certainly not as
It's just
black
the
and
family that's raising him.
yeah, and it's certainly not as black and white when you bring up this thought experiment. I will say, like, it depends on how you want to view race, and that's the other thing is like race in itself is an subjective opinion. If we look at it the purely biological way, no, they're just mixed race, and there's no other reality to it. Anthropologically speaking, if they always get accepted as race as white, and then they see like what does that even look like? So do they just not tell people that they had like mixed racial biological parents, or do they not know? There's a lot of things in this that like I just can't work out right away, because like even if they were to like live as a white person, like what does that mean to other people around them? Everyone just thinks that they're white. Um, so like this already happens. So what does accepting them mean if we're already kind of doing what you're describing?
Yeah, honestly, I'm starting to change my mind on this. Yeah,
Oh,
before the debate, I was thinking a lot about like in the 1800s, let's say an Irish person who wasn't seen as white necessarily, trying to become white in a sense over time and stuff like that. But I feel like you are made a good point that race is becoming less and less of a focal point of how social interactions in the day to day go for people. And that's a good thing. We want race and race to slowly go away as a way to categorize people. And yeah, honestly starting to doubt whether there's any real purpose in like having someone transition to another race instead of just adopting parts of that culture they like and still being whatever your race that you're viewed at is. I think I'm kind of changing my mind around to your view
Oh,
right
good.
now.
I'm glad to hear. This is awkward for me because I don't know what to say now.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna be the friendliest way a debate is ever concluded. It's,
Oh, that's
it's like, well,
kind
I
of
agree.
good then. That's nice.
No, but thank you for being so good faith on this and being willing to admit that.
Yeah, I try my best to just say what I'm thinking, which can lead to problems when I have dumb thoughts. But if you tell me my thoughts dumb, I'm going to change my mind if you convince me. So
This I'm going to be totally honest here. This is one of the most good faith discussions I think I've seen or witnessed in this otherwise horrifying Twitchosphere, where everyone's just like, I hate you, you're a Nazi, you're this, and this one's just like, let's have a reasonable conversation, and I have been swayed.
I'm glad, and I like having moderators just because I can't predict how things are going to go. But it's always nicer when the moderator isn't interrupting all the time and being like, "No, you have to let this person speak," and then the other person's mad, and then both sides
I
eventually
didn't have
get
to do
mad.
anything. What do you see? I think I've been silent for the last hour.
Yeah, Lance was pretty stone faced the entire time, and it like this KnowNothing guy like just when he's like just when he's starting to make me feel like yeah he's a bad guy, because he keeps on like pressing like these certain issues. He like does a 180 and he's like, oh, I'm changing my mind. So I guess discourse does work sometimes.
Yeah.